For over half a century, Canada has been a world leader in the production, use, and development of life-saving medical isotopes. The world is counting on Canada to expand this leadership role to support the diagnosis and treatment of cancer, ensuring medical equipment is safe for use, and to tackle some of our greatest challenges in health sciences. Welcome to the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council's Isotopes for Hope podcast with your host, James Scongack, Chair of the CNIC. In this series, we interview Canadian leaders who are making a difference every day. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Isotopes for Hope podcast.
I'm really excited today on our Isotopes for Hope podcast to have Rob Kamen join us. This is an individual that when we decided to do this podcast, we were really excited to have join us. He brings with him over 15 years of clinical leadership and expertise at UHN, that's University Health Network, specifically in nuclear medicine, patient flow, clinical utilization, and has been a consultant for a number of health facilities across the province. He is also the nuclear medicine lead and quality assessor for the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, and is chair of the Canadian Association of Medical Radiation Technologists. He's also a co-founder and past director of operations for a community hospice. And as a health innovator, he's the founding president of Southwest Exposures. Really looking forward to talking about Southwest Exposures today. It's an industry leading in shielding and packaging of medical isotopes for diagnostic and therapeutic applications. His organization holds a number of patents for shielding of radioactive isotopes used in the diagnosis and treatment of cancer. And for our listeners who may be wondering, what is the connection between packaging and shipping and medical isotopes? It's a major component of this supply chain. We can't safely get medical isotopes to patients for treatments without the work that Rob and his firm do. So, Rob, I really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, James. This is a great opportunity, and I'm so pleased to be here.
So Rob, before we get into sort of your organization, I know, like many of us, cancer is very personal for all of us, and sometimes when we talk about these processes, the work we're doing, we always like to keep a focus on what really matters, and it's people at the end of the day. Can you sort of talk to us about why the work that you do is so important?
Thanks, James. In 2020, I became a nuclear medicine technologist at University Health Network, Toronto General, and I really prided myself on being a patient care champion and taking care of patients. So it's really a wonderful career, and as you know, as a father, taking care of people is so meaningful. As my career progressed, I worked in different areas in the hospital. Eventually, I left the hospital to form Southwest Exposures. And as you mentioned, Southwest Exposures is a shielding and packaging company. We were born to support the rollout of theranostic drugs, and we'll speak about theranostics a lot today, I'm sure. In particular, in 2017, PSMA, prostate-specific membrane antigen, was in clinical trial, and it was the drug that was promising to launch theranostics. 5 years later, and in 2022, and this is where my story starts to sound a little bit like the Hair Club for Men. Not only am I the president of the Hair Club for Men, I'm a user. So in 2022, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And in my journey, I had a PET CT study, a PSMA PET CT study to help diagnose and localize my disease. And that helped my surgeon to provide the therapy that I needed, the intervention. And in fact, I went on to have radiation therapy, which is just another application of radiation, if you will.
And so maybe just for people that may not be as familiar with this space, and I think your personal story is it's quite amazing, from your work as a frontline healthcare professional to going and doing something pretty bold, which is, establishing the work that Southwest Exposures is doing, and then your personal experience. Can you talk about theranostics? It's a term that people tend to know what a diagnostic is. They know what a therapy is. Right. And you put those two words together and it's a theranostic. Can you just sort of anchor for people, Rob, what is a theranostic and why is it so important in terms of helping patients?
Theranostics is a combination word. It's the combination of diagnostics and therapeutics. So for 50 years, the specialty of nuclear medicine has primarily been diagnostics, albeit at the birth of nuclear medicine with I-131. I-131 is officially the first theranostic drug. So by theranostics, what we mean is you use one radioisotope linked to a medication or a drug to diagnose an illness, and then you link this same medication or drug to a second radioisotope to provide the therapy. I previously mentioned PSMA, prostate-specific membrane antigen. That is linked to either F-18 or gallium-68 for a PET scan, positron emission tomography, to diagnose cancer within a man's body, prostate cancer specifically. And then for therapy, we would link it to, right now, the approved drug of the approved isotope lutetium-177 PSMA, and the research-based drugs actinium-225 and lead-212. So the drug or ligand PSMA is an approved biomarker that seeks out a membrane antigen. And what essentially we need to look at it like a lock and key mechanism. Cells have surface markers on their surface markers that the ligand seeks out. It's specific. It's not actually specific to prostate. It's just highly expressed in prostate. Right. So that's where it got its name. But PSMA has applications in other solid tumors and other cancers. Theranostics is that application of a drug with two different isotopes to provide diagnosis and therapy.
So, Rob, if you projected out 10 years, and we can never predict the future, but if you sort of projected out 10 years, talk to us a little bit about your view on theranostics. Like, where do you think we'll be 10 years from now?
That's an exciting question. It really is. Even as recently as last week, there was a research trial that was released, the findings of a research trial, the NETTER-2 trial. And in that trial, they demonstrated that lutetium dotatate can be effectively used as a first-line therapy for gastroenteropancreatic tumors. So all of a sudden, you have a new first-line therapy, potential new first-line therapy that is more effective than the standard of care today for GEP, neuroendocrine tumors. In the case of prostate cancer, PSMA was initially approved for, let's call it end-stage disease. Patients who have metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer. So they've been through primary surgery, they've had tertiary or let's call it tertiary therapy, be it drug therapy or radiation therapy, and their disease continues to progress. At this point, we can give the patients lutetium PSMA, and we can expand their progression, or lengthen for that matter, their progression-free survival. So that's where the drug was approved, and that approval came about 2 years ago. Now there's research studies to move it forward in the line of therapy. So it's just recently in October of 2023, there was results that showed it improved progression-free survival over the standard of care of chemotherapeutics. So 10 years from now, certainly in the domain of prostate cancer, I would predict that it's a frontline therapy. Some Australian researchers recently released research that showed giving lutetium PSMA prior to prostatectomy, which is first-line therapy, improved overall survival and reduced the need to have therapy after surgery. So in the domain of prostate cancer, I would think it will become a first-line therapy. And theranostics is being investigated in, I would say, over 20 solid tumors right now throughout North America, Europe, Australia.
So really a game changer for patients. And I think, Rob, what's so exciting is not only fundamentally here the impact. I mean, you have a personal story where it's changed your life in what I'm sure was a very challenging time, but also the unique role for Canada, whether it's and I do want to talk about your organization a little bit, but whether it's the production, the processing, the movement, the use, this is an area Canada can lead. And I think it's exceptionally exciting. So Rob, when you came in, you gave me a hat from your organization, and on the front it says shielding A to Z, but it's AC225 and ZR89. So I'm gonna put the hat on, and I'm gonna be showing off and talking to everybody about this podcast now that I have the hat. So talk to me about your organization and what that A to Z means.
So theranostics is employing a range of radioisotopes. Actinium-225 is an alpha emitter that is used in clinical research right now for prostate as well as several other solid tumors, and is a very promising isotope for therapy. I want to take a step back. Canada has always had a leading role in the nuclear industry and in isotope production. Chalk River, we produced, contributed for many, many years to the Molly-Tech industry, to iodine-131 production. So we have a rich history. And as Canadians, we have to be proud of that. What Bruce Power is doing in its partnership is amazing science, and it's returning us as a leader to the global stage. Lutetium-177 is really the isotope that's launching theranostics, and we are a major contributor to the global supply chain. Bruce Power is leading that, so it's phenomenal, and I have to say kudos. What Southwest is trying to do is recognize that the quantities that are being shipped and the activities of the isotopes that are coming out are really quite high, and we need to be able to provide safe transport for these isotopes. When you look at isotope production or radiopharmaceutical manufacturing, both of those starting points have enormous primary engineering controls that provide the highest degree of safety. And the safety sort of starts to drop off when it leaves the primary engineering controls and it goes through transport, whether it's ground or by air, all the way to the hospitals where they receive the medication and administer it to patients. What is critically important to me is access to care. The thrust of Southwest is to provide safe access to care. So we look to provide innovation in shielding so that the safety, let's call it the safety quotient of the primary engineering controls, can be a continuum all the way to the patient bedside and patient administration.
And I think that's so important because oftentimes what we forget about, I often think, Rob, about a medical isotope when it comes out of a reactor or a cyclotron. It's like an ice cube out of your fridge. And the goal is to get that ice cube into the patient's glass still as an ice cube. And what I think is so important about what you're doing is you're really providing that safety. So that isotope can use regular commercial means, an Air Canada flight from Pearson to Munich or Pearson to Indiana. And I think that's so important. And as we've learned, especially during the pandemic, logistics is everything. And can you talk a little bit about the half-life of these isotopes? So for our listeners, a half-life really means the time it takes for that isotope to get back to what it was before it was irradiated, which is a very short window. And so that's what makes logistics so important. So when you sought to really go and advance this work at Southwest Exposures, you sort of talk about your vision in terms of how the organization felt there was a need for what you're providing.
So you're right, that half-life is really critical, particularly for the just-in-time delivery, because it is the time component. How time sensitive is this? Obviously, from the patient's viewpoint, there's a different time sensitivity. Absolutely. And it's got to be yesterday. For isotopes, their half-life defines how long it takes for half the material to change state and not be effective anymore. Let's describe it that way. So the logistics supply chain and Southwest is just in shielding and packaging. I shouldn't say we're in shielding and packaging. The logistics supply chain, we have experts in that supply chain. A fellow member of CNIC and a partner of Southwest, Pacer Air here in Ontario, is a leader in just-in-time delivery. And our two specialties overlap like a Venn diagram would, with Bruce Power, for example, as the isotope provider, and then there's a packaging component and there's a shipping component, and together you get that sweet spot. So what we tried to do was recognize that, you mentioned Air Canada, a surprising number or amount of cargo goes on commercial airlines. And there's regulations as to how much cumulative TI, transport index, which is a measurement of how much radiation is coming off of a package, how much cumulatively can go into an aircraft. And it's not, there's a fixed number, so the better you shield any given package, the more packages you can put on the plane. And there's some discretionary decisions made by the pilot who is in charge of the aircraft. So if you can provide a package that has a lower TI with the same amount or more radiation packaged within it, that's going to be more favorably seen, and you can get more of those packages onto the airplane. So at the end of the day, it's time. Time determines how much of the isotope gets to the end user. So the just-in-time delivery and the expertise of logistics companies like Pacer is critically important. The shielding component allows more activity to be packed into the package with less radioactivity being detected coming out of the package.
And Rob, one of the things we found through the lutetium production at Bruce Power, and I think you're right on the money here, is number one, we're seeing higher activity coming out, which is a good thing,
yeah.
Right? It means we can help more people with the same production. But yes, that just-in-time movement, I can tell you we've produced enough lutetium in our first year for 10,000 treatments. And it's only been thanks to all that logistics. And so I think the role you play is absolutely important as that baton gets handed off to reach the patient in the end. So if we take a step back, obviously this has impacted you personally. You, as I mentioned earlier, you've been on the front lines. You're into the isotope sector. If you take a step back and you think about this as a Canadian, and you talked earlier about our historic role, why is this an area that Canada should uniquely play in? Like why? We're a country of just under 40 million people. South of the border, we have a country of 10 times the size, Europe 10 times the size. So we really have to pick our spots as Canadians. And I think we should be sometimes I think we are too humble talking about our successes. We should be very proud of this. But why this area as an area we should continue to surgically, excuse the pun, go after?
It's a great question, and I couldn't agree more. I think we are nationally a little bit too humble. And that's not the worst thing, but in this space, we should be more outspoken because we're global leaders. We're global leaders in the production. Bruce Power, Canadian Nuclear Labs, look at Triumph, the largest cyclotron in the world. It's unbelievable. Even McMaster University, their research reactor is providing isotopes globally for research as well as for clinical imaging studies. So I know I heard you say this in an interview, we punch well above our weight. Our scientists are leading scientists. Here in Ontario, we have biotech companies that are leading the development and rollout of drug manufacturing. They're leading theranostics, actinium-225 development for PSMA, lutetium-177 for PSMA. We have much to be proud of in the isotope sector in terms of healthcare. My surgeon, Dr. Neil Fleshner, he is world-renowned in what he does. And I'm here today, thankfully, because of what he does and the amazing care that I received at Princess Margaret Hospital. So we have all of the resources, the natural resources. We have the intellectual property. We have the grit and determination and the organizations to do this. And I don't want to jump script, but thanks to CNIC, we're all coming together. So we're a small population in a large landmass, and it's hard for small organizations and even large businesses to know one another. And that's one of the critical roles that CNIC is playing, is to identify the players in the ecosystem and help build alliances and bridges.
Rob, I think it's a great point, and sometimes what I have found in this sector, and it seems consistent with your experience, is we're much stronger when we're united. And all of the players you talked about, whether it's Triumph in British Columbia, research reactors, power reactors, the supply chain, the great news is we're also all complementary of each other. We're not, and this is about Team Canada coming. Absolutely, right? We need everything to play. And globally, there's no other country that has that aggregate. So an incredibly exciting time. Well, listen, firstly, thanks for the hat. It's my new running hat. And I want to thank you for sharing your personal story and your personal experience with cancer. You look great, and glad to see you've come through that. But most importantly, what you've been able to do in terms of paying it forward, and through your work at Southwest Exposures, the work you did as a frontline healthcare professional. Thank you. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, James. This is a pleasure. And again, I just want to say how grateful I am to be a member of CNIC and congratulate you for all of the work that you are doing at Bruce Power and that CNIC is doing. I would call CNIC the nucleus of our ecosystem. So congratulations and thank you again.
That should be our new tagline.
I'm going to go patent that.
There you go. Thanks again, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council Isotopes for Hope podcast with James Scongack. Please share this podcast and follow us to stay in the loop. To learn more, please visit our website at canadianisotopes.ca.